Good morning. Is everyone fired up and ready to go? Well, I can't tell you how excited I am to be at the Woodstock of innovative approaches to acquisition. And I want to join Ann in thanking Mark for organizing this, and for Brian Sivak at HHS for recruiting Mark to play this leadership role. Ann and Mark are far too modest to tell you this, but they recently got to brief the President of the United States in the Oval Office on innovative approaches to acquisition. And the President's only question was, how do we institutionalize this? How do we get more people to start using these approaches? And that is, I think, the main question that I think this community has to figure out. I also want to thank everyone who helped write this set of case studies. This included Doug Rand on my team, and Matthew Blum and others at OFPP, and innovators across the federal government. And as a result of this, I think we now have a growing body of evidence that these approaches can allow the government to pay only for results, make choices on the basis of demonstrated capability as opposed to paper proposals, and occasionally there is a difference between those, increase the success rate of IT projects using agile, iterative, and human-centered methodologies, which USDS and PIF and GSA's 18F, otherwise known as the Rebel Alliance, have been working on. Increasing our ability to collaborate with commercial firms that have not traditionally done business with the federal government, harnessing the expertise of millions of citizen solvers and reaching well beyond the usual suspects, and working with companies and innovators to co-design and co-develop solutions as opposed to having an arm's length relationship. We now have this growing body of evidence, and I'm sure everyone has read this. It's a real page turner about how to use some of these approaches. And one of my favorite examples was recently highlighted by the Washington Post in a profile of Alan Lindenmoyer. Do we have anyone from NASA in the house? He had more than 30 years of experience working with NASA's human spaceflight program, and NASA decided to use milestone payments and a partnership with entrepreneurial firms that are investing their own money to achieve shared goals. Alan purchased services from companies such as SpaceX as opposed to having NASA build their own rockets. NASA invested $400 million using this approach, but estimates that it could have cost them as much as $4 billion under a business as usual approach. So think about that, spending $400 million as opposed to $4 billion. In the process, this project strengthened U.S. leadership in the space launch industry and is allowing U.S. companies to set even more ambitious goals, like making humanity a multiplanetary species. As Elon Musk, the CEO of SpaceX, put it, "I want to die on Mars, but not on impact." More recently, USAID, in collaboration with CDC and the Department of Defense, issued a grand challenge to improve the personal protective equipment for health workers that are fighting Ebola. A lot of our health workers were suffering from heat exhaustion because of the nature of the personal protective equipment. In less than 2 months, USAID received 1,500 ideas, and the best ideas are now being tested for deployment to help us, particularly with future outbreaks. So these approaches to acquisition can help the government and its partners solve really important problems, which is why I think the work that you are doing is so critical to the nation. So the question that I have for everyone here, and I hope we can answer in the context of idea scale, and Ann has talked about creating some focus groups is how do we increase the number of people within the federal government that know that these approaches exist and understand the rationale for using them, to develop high-quality online and blended learning opportunities. So how do we share some of these promising approaches? How do we provide incentives and professional recognition for federal workers that master and use these approaches? And how do we identify and address any real or perceived barriers to using these approaches? So one of the things OMB has been doing a lot is myth busting, right? So when we discover that people aren't using a particular approach, there may be no reason in law or regulation, but there is some urban legend that says, oh, you're not allowed to do that. And sometimes it's very useful for OMB to issue guidance saying, yea, verily, you can do this and not go to jail. So rather than the White House and the Office of Management and Budget trying to guess what this community would find useful, I'm hoping that you will get together and tell us what we could collectively do that would increase the level of awareness that these approaches exist, provide incentives to use these, eliminate any barriers that exist, and increase the quantity and quality of resources that will allow more agencies to experiment with these approaches. So again, Mark, thanks to you and your team for organizing this, and we look forward to the follow-up from this conference. Thank you.